Okay, part two. So in part one, week three, part one, we covered the assessments and how to take them, and also about keeping language simple. The goal is not to show off your wonderful English. The goal is to make it understandable to students, to make directions clear. So in TEE, teaching English through English, you get to the language learning part, which is completing the game or activity in their pairs or individually or groups. So directions are key, simple directions. In this part, we're going to look at other input methods. The first and most important being listening. Listening happens before speaking, as you know from child development. You take in a lot of language, in your case Korean, before you can assimilate and understand and produce language. So listening is step one. We'll also look at some reading and break reading down into its parts. So here I have a Prezi. I'll make it available on the Weebly site. Two things we talk about, bottom up and top down. Now, essentially, from bottom up, it means like starting at the lowest rung of language, which is phonemes. Rung, by the way, is the step on a ladder. So imagine climbing a ladder. You start at the bottom with phonemes, which is a fancy word for sounds. Each word is broken up into sounds, and there are something like, let me check actually. Wanted to get the numbers right before I started guessing. So it says in here there are 19 consonant phonemes. Of course, consonants are the hard sounds, the k, g, t. 7 vowel phonemes, the joining sounds, the a, e, and 2 glide phonemes in Korean, which makes up 28 sounds. English, there are 44. So we have 26 letters, which is how you see the language, but how you hear it comes through 44 different sounds. Of course, we have 5 vowels, which is a, o, u, essentially. So we start with those in language, the sounds, make sense of the sounds. Then you work up to making words with the sounds. So if you take the word pen, you've got one word made up of 3 sounds, p, e, n. But if you take a word like key, 3 letters, but only 2 sounds or 2 phonemes, k and e. The y is not pronounced, but it could be easier, should be easier if it was K-E-E, but if it was, we'd still read it as key. Phrases, a group of sounds. Give me the key. Utterances, a group of other ones. Well, I'm not sure if you know what you mean. To texts, which can be paragraphs and essays and books and things. And I've given some examples. Now, these examples are for language learners. So you might start with something called minimal pairs. Now, if I open up an example, it's a common exercise where you compare only 2 phonemes, typically, of a language. So if we take this one, we've got your cheese. No, I don't like that one. Let's choose a better example. Yeah, here's a nice easy one. E, like this. Ship, sheep. Lip, leap. Dip, deep. So you're comparing only the 2 phonemes, and e. A and e would be a different pair of phonemes. Comparing a, sad, said, bad, bed. Bed, B-E-D, said, S-A-I-D, has the same middle or second phoneme. And that's why it's important to hear the words before you can make sense of the spelling and the seeing of the words. So that is phonemes, minimal pairs. Listen and write the number of words. So it says write the number, not the words. So if I say, please give me a key, and students write down how many words they hear. Please give me a key. So hopefully they got 5. So this is trying to break down sentences into distinguishing them as words. Find stressed syllable a bit more difficult. Listening for phonemes. So how many times do you hear an ah sound? And you say, it could be a list of words like bad, bed, said, had, or it could be a sentence. He gave me a bad sentence. Listening for the number of speakers is a good way to start breaking down from bottom up. How many different people do you hear speaking? And it's not because of dialect or accent, it's because of a different response type in a conversation. So that's another good bottom-up exercise. If we take top down, so it's literally starting at the top of the ladder. You've got the bird's eye view. You're looking down on the whole language. You can see the context, the situation. It's like a film when it starts, panning down from the sky, then focusing in on a certain character. So drawing a word map might be a good example. Trying to get students to relate words to each other, what the relationship is. Looking and discussing a picture. Again, there's a lot of different language needed. Different people will come with different questions, different observations. Yeah, that's all I'll do with that. So bottom up is the typical way that you teach in elementary schools in Korea. Traditional practices. You pre-teach the vocabulary. You tell students all the words they're going to hear. Nowadays, we'd say, let's focus on the critical, the important vocabulary. The other ones become incidental, words that are less important, and you can ask and find out for yourselves. Instead of doing a long preparation, you do a longer focus after listening. So listen first, then ask questions second. Okay, I'm going to zip through this. Another thing you can use is something called, instead of scripted materials, like prepared especially for the classroom, you can use authentic materials, which means any English which you haven't simplified or adapted especially for the classroom. That could be, well, I've got examples here. It could be, for you, fruit and vegetable names. So you show them a market stall with all the names of the fruit, and they have to tell you what the names are. Now, we're talking listening. So instead of reading, they'd be listening to them. If we take a quick example, I think an example I've done before is this. So you play it and students have to listen for the types of fruits that they hear.
Grammarly helps make your writing clear and concise.
After a quick advert from Grammarly. By the way, Grammarly is quite useful, the free version. Difficult to hear, and I'd probably find a simpler version for children, but it's a challenge. Did you hear the fruit? Once again, he is talking about
lovely plums, 8 for a pound.
Lovely plums, 8 for a pound. So he's talking about plums, jadu, and because of the London accent, it makes it more challenging. But you could record your own. This recording your own is not strictly authentic, but you get the idea. Gate numbers at an airport. So they're listening to a recording of a flight being called for Boston at gate 5. They have to tell you what the number is. Departure times, listening for when the train departs to Busan. Items in a lost and found, so it becomes on the loudspeaker. So we found a bag, it's black, you know, and you have to name what the item is. Floors and sections in a department store. Again, that could be announcements made on a loudspeaker. These are all authentic examples. Okay, and that's all I really want to do here. Another good point to note is instead of students working alone, working in pairs is more typical, where again they're trying to learn from each other. All right. Now we will go into this in slightly more detail later. So for example, one of the last micro lessons is called Listening and Pronunciation. And on the website, if you go to dnuece.weebly, you scroll down to here, you will find in week 14 all these things called phonemes, phonemic awareness exercises, etc. Now we've already talked about phonemes, the sounds in the language, the first step on that letter. I'll talk a bit more about it now because it is important. One thing relating to pronunciation that frustrates a lot of my learners is this thing about pronunciation. And it happens because Korean language is syllable timed. It's based on producing syllables. So to take this skirt, you'd pronounce it as skirt. So you've got 1, 2, 3 syllables. What syllable in Korean again? I've forgotten. So anyways, package of sound. Whereas in English, when we say skirt, it sounds as 1 syllable. And that makes it difficult for many Korean language learners who didn't practice or hear English from an early age. It makes it difficult for them to pronounce like a native speaker. So that's why phonemic awareness activities are particularly important, not just this rhythm that English is, makes it difficult for English because it's rhythm based and intonation, but also in correct, being understood what it is you're trying to say. And we'll come into that in a second. Okay, that's all I'll do for now for phonemes, because I can go on forever. Let's go on to reading. Now, I said, following the bottom-up process, you start with the sounds. And if we look at some books, now this is not the easiest way to do this, but it's not the easiest for you, it's the easiest for me. If we take some books, now here I've got Reading Readiness, made for kindergarten. It starts with alphabet. Now, of course, you're well aware that one of the first things you do with children is the alphabet song, and you sing the A, B, C, D. Well, that's fine, but before seeing and pronouncing the letters, what's more important is sounding the sounds. So if I go forward from this alphabet zone, the first thing I see, which is good, is the what's my sound. And you get pictures. So here's, where are we? The and we're looking for an sound in this case. And you have to circle any animals or things that start with an So for mice, yes. For moon, yes. S for sun, no. And it's usually the first sound. So for example, if it was bomb, the last sound, that's more confusing for children. B is the first sound, so that wouldn't be included here. Map would be okay. So that's phonemic recognition, recognizing which words share the first phoneme together. And they do the consonant sounds first. Consonants, again, being the hard sounds, the B, D, K. as opposed to the vowels, which is the a, e, sounds. So that's a good example of starting. And then you'll see it does go from first sounds, like we said, for map and mouse, and it goes into final sounds next, which would be, it's somewhere in here. So the last sound of map is p, ending sounds. Last sound of cat is k. Where are we? Ending sounds over here, etc. So that's a good example of doing phonemes with children of an early, young age. Another thing you must cover is high frequency words. Words that you see and hear a lot. So we can, if this book is, this is level 4, so this is probably more like grade 4, I guess. And what's a good example? So they're practicing how to read some of these words, and typically they're grouped with the same first sound. Want, warm, hat, hot. And in this case, they're trying to write the word that is the same sound. So hot is different from hat and hat. Sorry, you're off screen there. But again, it's about phonemes. That's the first important step in reading. We've mentioned high frequency words, words that appear a lot. Another one you'll see, now if you click on teaching reading, you will get to this, one of my other websites, where there's quite a lot. But there's a thing called sight words. And if you click on that, you will find this. Now, sight words are, it says here, words that cannot be sounded out. It doesn't follow simple rules of phoneme pronunciation. They need to be learned by sight. This is where your great skills of rote memorization come in. So if we click on the first, let's see, here's a pre-primer vocabulary word list. The very first ones. So here we mentioned already about key, this Y. It doesn't have any special rules, because sometimes, you've got year when it starts with it. If it's in the middle of a word like I, A-Y-E, it's a different sound again, and then you've got away. So children need to just memorize them. So seeing those words a lot, putting those into texts, making your own texts with these words is a good idea. Where, common words, said, this other difficult one, the A sound is A-I. So these are sight words. They should be seen a lot and heard a lot by children, so that they become automatic. Right, and that moves us on to, here's another quick book I will introduce. This says The Complete Book of Reading. It's clearly an American book. It's not used in children's schools, at EFL schools in Korea. But if we look, again, we get things like read and rhyme. Find words that rhyme. So they have to try and glue pictures. And in this case, if you can see there, here you have a cat, and they look down to the pictures down below and see which of these rhymes with cat. So hat. And they cut this out and glue it here. Reading is not just reading. Listening is not just listening. You can create exercises to break a task down so that instead of, for example, students having to write, in this case, they're just simply matching it. So they're sounding it in their head, matching the picture, putting it in a blank. That is great for micro lessons and real classrooms, especially at lower levels. All these earlier pages, there's write and hear. It's listening again before they can produce the words. They do vowel puzzles. There's a lot on this thing called long I, short I, long E, short E. I think that's confusing personally. And then moving up, you move into these digraphs, things about two letters together, th. So think, thumb, 30, higher level. That's all counted as reading. Producing, being able to recognize the sounds, whether it's a hard sound, the consonant, soft sound, the vowel, and which ones are of similar sounds, including these digraphs or two letters together, th and ch for chair, etc. Okay, I think that's enough for today. That gives you a brief introduction. Have a look through these. There will be another assessment as before. Log in using your same email address that you used for Google Classroom. Okay, that makes my task a lot easier. So please check that you are logged in to the correct address, take the quiz as early as possible. I may make the deadline Friday this week because if I don't, you don't get the subtitles in time. Like this week, I had a panic, and for 2 days, YouTube did not auto-generate my subtitles. I had to listen to myself talk and type. Poor you. And I'm not good at typing. So that's an activity I don't want to repeat. Take class. I'm guessing your regular hours, which means by Thursday my class finishes education period 5 and 6. Take the assessment straight away. You should all be done by Friday night or Friday morning or Thursday night. Brilliant. Okay, enough for now. Hope you're doing well and see you next week.